Why is absolutely no one talking about the exclusive scene of Joy Boy in this week's anime episode? It's the first scene of the episode, an angel falling from the skies into the ocean, feathers all over the water's godly sound effects. Joy Boy is a Lunarian. Alright, this was something so insane that we do actually need to talk about it. The One Piece anime, it's well known for taking its own liberties from time to time, mostly by extending material and adding implied filler. Implied filler being events that were mentioned in the manga but not shown. The anime chooses to show them. But what happened in this episode is an entirely different beast. At the very start of episode 1148, we have a rather artistic scene of what appears to be an angel falling from the sky. It's losing feathers the entire way down, and we can also see that our angel, of course, has a defined head. Our angel then plunges into the ocean, and we get one last shot of these lingering white feathers as the angel sinks into the deep darkness. And then up pops the title, The Lost History, Joy Boy, the First Pirate. The implication via juxtaposition being that the scene we just saw was a depiction of Joy Boy, potentially even Joy Boy's final moments of life. And if so, then Joy Boy could be the only known devil fruit user to have drowned in One Piece. Despite the sea being the key weakness of fruit users, we've never actually known of anyone who has drowned in One Piece canon. Luffy, he goes for a swim and every now and then. And I guess in filler it's a bit different because Eric the Whirlwind almost certainly drowned after being kicked into Reverse Mountain, but we're going to continue ignoring him as we usually do. And I guess if you want to get technical, Jack has drowned, but he was a fishman, so it didn't result in the typical state of death that drowning would usually imply. Back to Joy Boy though, this scene, mate, it is wild because nothing like this exists in the manga. This is completely anime original material, and it has left a lot of viewers with the implication that Joy Boy was a Lunarian, and I can see why you would think that. Although you may also think that these white feathers would disqualify that sort of conclusion because Lunarians, they have these black wings according to a certain king. However, a Lunarian using Gear 5th would almost certainly have white feathers, so it does fit as far as that goes. But look, I've got two explanations for this. One is the boring, logical, unexciting, but most likely explanation. And the second is the one that I think most of us want to believe it is. But to start with the straightforward, episode 1148 adapts about 16 pages of manga across two chapters. The first of which is chapter 1114, which is titled The Wings of Icarus. And whilst Icarus isn't actually mentioned in this chapter, Vegapunk does do an homage to the story by claiming that he flew too close to the sun in his desire to push the world forward into the future, which is an obvious reference to the story of Icarus. And so the anime may have taken up that offer as a chance for, some filler by creating their own Icarus-inspired scene. And in this case, the winged figure here would be more of a metaphor for Dr. Vegapunk than Joy Boy, and it's just confusing people because it's juxtaposed directly against Joy Boy's name in the episode title, which is again, The Lost History, Joy Boy, the First Pirate. And that title, I should point out, is nowhere near close to the titles of either manga chapter that this episode adapts, which are again chapter 1114, The Wings of Icarus, but it also adapts part of chapter 1115, which is titled Pieces of a Continent. So the decision to go with a Joy Boy title, it is quite deliberate because the manga, again, it did not do this. And it does make me wonder if there is more to this opening than just some Icarus filler. Again, to be clear, I think that the most likely option is that this is just the anime looking for an excuse to animate a fun artsome scene, but it is also possible that One Piece is now getting to such a late stage that certain directors are told endgame elements of the series, which is not at all unprecedented. Several directors do actually know the ending of One Piece, and I've seen this old quote popping up from 2002 when Eiichiro Oda was talking about the anime. At the time he said, "In the animation, I don't really mind how any part is handled. So long as the people really think about the characters and love One Piece, then I think they can do anything." Which is essentially licensed to adapt One Piece however they want, which is how we got certain filler arcs. But also remember that this was said 23 years ago. I don't think that that is still 100% true today. And what the anime did here could turn out to be one of the more relevant pieces of foreshadowing in the entire series, whether it be accidental or intentional, if Joy Boy did turn out to be a Lunarian. Although right now, again, I think I need to stay on the skeptical side and say that this is just a combination of two factors that weren't necessarily meant to be related. depicted. One factor is the undeniable need for filler and the choice of being inspired by the story of Icarus, which again Vegapunk he does hint at, and the other factor is the completely separate decision of what to name the episode. Those choices, they were not made by the same people. And it could be that the unintended outcome of those separate choices has now combined to heavily imply to anime-only watchers that Joy Boy was indeed the winged figure being depicted. And that is not the only questionable winged figure that we're dealing with this week. Hey Internet Man, one of Roger's crew has bat wings. You can see him carrying a treasure chest whilst near Ray Lee carrying Shaki. So yeah, we have a lot of wing talk today. And the commenter is referring to this guy in the bottom right hand side of this panel, as there is indeed a dude with bat-like wings. And the recent deluge of Domi Reversi content appears to have some people thinking that he was transformed by Emu, but this dude right here, his name is Duringo, and this is just how he is. We've seen him a ton of different times now in the background, as well as in Oda's sketches of the Roger Pirates. And there is this theory that there's actually a whole ton of secret bat people in the One Piece world, because Duringo isn't the only winged individual that we've ever seen. Charlotte Decroix, the 41st spawn to pop out of Big Mom's overly populated uterus, also has bat-like wings, much bigger wings mind you, although the most well-known example would be the current Vice Warden of Impel Down, Mr. Magellan. But as fun as some sort of secret bat race would be, in each of these cases it appears to be more of a fashion statement. During the Odin flashback, for example, Oda sent nudes of most of the Roger Pirates, which included Duringo, who you can see cheering in the background here with Inuarashi, but what you cannot see are any wings. And that's because Duringo's wings are part of his clothing, not part of his actual body. And it's more than likely that both Magellan and Hannibal wear wings ornamentally as well to give themselves a more demonic impression, as Oda has drawn pictures of them as children and neither of them have wings, although this does get a bit confusing because in the From the Decks of the World cover story, when we catch up with Magellan, he has augmented his wings with metal, implying that they were part of his body and that he needed to have them fixed/repaired when they were damaged. Sort of like how Jesus Burgess plastered his face with metal after being burned ever so badly by that nasty Sabo. And if Magellan's wings were ornamental, then surely you just get new ones. So look, I'm not 100% sure, but it does appear that anyone with bat wings outside of Emu or Domi Reversi victims is more of an edgy fashion choice. I think it's time we question how evil Blackbeard is for stealing the Dark Fruit. If he is destined to play a role in defeating Emu, it makes sense he stole the only devil fruits that can presumably negate Domi Reversi and immortality. Maybe this is about more than just greed. So I think that this topic may go a bit deeper than what Oda intends to explore with One Piece. But as soon as you start talking about destiny and free will, we pretty quickly hit questions that can't be answered. Because Blackbeard certainly is a subject of fate, just like Luffy, and if it was his destiny to acquire the Darkness Fruit at this exact time and this exact place, then can he really be blamed for murdering Thatch? It seems like a really stupid question, but was Blackbeard really in charge of his actions if it was destiny that was commanding him? Officer, it was destiny who made me do it. And unfortunately, you can't ask the very same question of Luffy whenever fate really needs to step in and save him, which is a bit more awkward because Luffy, he's supposed to be this ultimate avatar of freedom. So it is rather ironic that his future also seems somewhat pre-written and scripted to a degree. Luffy's life, it's very much on rails with this whole prophecy business of bringing about the dawn of the world. But again, I don't know if Oda really wants us to look quite that deeply into it, which means that TLDR Blackbeard is a bad dude. Why is it so hard to fathom that Teach just evolved into who he is despite what his parents did for him to survive? It's hard to fathom mainly because One Piece, it is a fictional story, and that's just not very interesting. If the main antagonist of the entire series just so happened to adopt his extreme worldviews for no discernible reason. And you might think that we've already had a character like that with a certain Davy Jones, who famously said that humans had never done anything to him, but we actually got a very detailed explanation for how he became a phantom of hatred. It was because Hody and the rest of the new fisherman pirates, they were sponges for the feelings of the adults around them. And because the adult fishermen like the Arlongs, they were expressing so much hatred towards humans, that hatred got soaked into the spongy goodness and they inherited it and they became it. They became phantoms of the hatred of generations before them. That's also why Otohime was so prepared to sacrifice herself for St. Mosgard. It wasn't just to provide them with a chance to live on the surface one day, but it was because she didn't want the next generation of children to watch that act of hatred and become another generation of Hodies. So if even the man who had no personal reason to evolve into what he is still had a very fleshed out history that told us exactly how he got to that point, then I do think it would be disappointing at the very least if Blackbeard did not. It took till you referred to Emu as he to realize I've always assumed Emu to be a woman, and I'm not really sure why. Well, I can give you two very powerful reasons why. But Emu, it is so fascinating to read all of your comments about Emu, because I get so many different commenters referring to him, her, they as so many different things. And I think that this is largely a product of the anime, because Emu's voice is deliberately layered with both masculine and feminine qualities. So it's kind of like that annoying white and gold or black and blue dress. A lot of people will hear Emu's dialogue and insist that Emu is a woman, whilst others will hear the exact opposite and insist that he's a man. Realistically, at this stage, I don't know if terms like man and woman can accurately describe whatever the crap it is Emu is, because we don't even know if Emu is a human or is it not that. And there's also a couple of people who do get a little bit frustrated that I don't use gender neutral terminology for Emu, because there is a lot we don't know, as I just admitted. But the one thing we do actually know is that Emu is 99.999% a he, because he is referred to with the male world noble honorific, which is sei, rather than gu, which is how female world nobles are referred to. And native Japanese speakers generally agree that Emu speaks like a man. And I also personally think that it's just the Occam's razor explanation given the obsession with Lily and Vivi, so until shown otherwise, that's just what we'll go with. About the world noble's powers having something to do with control. Saint Summers makes thorns to make you do his bidding, while Gunko uses actual arrows to make things go her way, and Saint Gillingham controls dreams. This is such a great comment. In a previous video, I went into detail about the similarities between Doflamingo and Emu's abilities and how they are both based on removing freedom and taking control, but this is indeed a pattern throughout every world noble who possesses a special power. And what's really cool is that they each take command of a different plane. With our Holy Knight, Saint Summers and his Thorn powers are very effective at removing freedom from the physical realm. Meanwhile, Saint Killingham operates in a very sinister space of the dream world, where you now have to police your own thoughts because they can be brought to life and used against you. And then you have Gunko, who uses her arrow ability to more or less control the future. So you're not safe in the past because that past brought you to the present. You're not safe in the present because thorns. You won't be safe in the future because these arrows are telling you what's going to happen to you. And you cannot even achieve escapism through dreaming, because anything you dream about can and will be used against you. And it really makes me wonder what ability Shamrock is going to have, if any. He doesn't need to be a fruit user, although I do think it would help distinguish him a bit more from Shanks if he was. But even if he isn't, Shamrock is still going to have his own unique exploration of control that I very much look forward to seeing. Little weird of Toei to start going seasonal when we are getting a new studio seasonal One Piece anyway soon. Brilliant topic. I don't think that it is weird at all. It makes ever so much sense. And I do think that this has been the plan for quite some time that Toei have been slowly transitioning into. And one of the factors that plays into that plan is of course the Wit Studio remake, which is called The One Piece, which we still have no idea when that will begin airing. However, what I'm imagining is that in the future, we will still have one episode of One Piece every week. It's just that not all of those episodes are going to be produced by Toei. So the way that anime seasons function is via a core system. There are 4 cores in a year, so they're 3-month blocks of about 12 episodes, sometimes more, sometimes less. And a single season of anime these days is generally divided into 2 cores. Generally, not always. So imagine that we have the first quarter of the year with, say, 13 episodes of the Toei anime. We're starting Elbaf, but then the second core of the year is 13 episodes of the Wit Studio remake, commencing from East Blue. And then the third quarter of the year, we're back to Toei, we're continuing Elbaf, and the final quarter of the year, we're back to the Wit Studio remake, continuing East Blue. And then we have 2 different One Piece series running in tandem, but also making sure not to step on each other. And I could be wrong, but look, if Toei really felt like they had to go seasonal to maintain, the integrity of the show, then that's something they would have done a long time ago. We're talking like 10 to 15 years ago. So as much as I do like their decision, I have to put on that cynical business hat and say that Toei are doing it now to make room for the Wit Studio remake and to make sure that Toei and Wit Studio are never directly competing with one another. Am I inexplicably awake at 3:30 in the morning watching a rather charming Australian man talk about fictional pirates again? Yes. Yes, I am. Yes, you are. And I'd like to extend a big welcome to everyone watching this channel at the witching hour, for whatever reason that may be. I know a lot of you who comment at these weird hours, you work overnight shifts. Meanwhile, the rest of you probably don't work at all. The scene in Post Marineford where Blackbeard offers to take Bonnie as his wife just keeps getting creepier with the knowledge that Kuma saved a child that would destroy the pirate crew of his daughter. I mean, that scene was creepy enough originally that week when it happened, but it does keep getting worse and worse over time. Now, to be as fair as I can to one of the worst people that we all know, there is no way that Blackbeard knew Bonnie's true age at the time that he made this advance, and he does ultimately reject Bonnie for not being ladylike enough for him, so that's something. But here is our new twist on this. Not only did Kuma save Marshall D. Teach and thus ultimately construct this situation between Bonnie and Blackbeard, but this isn't even the first time that Bonnie has seen Blackbeard. Bonnie saw her father's memories, and so she has actually seen the exact moment where her father saved the life of her future captor. Bonnie may not have recognized Blackbeard as a child, but these two have such a convoluted connection to one another, and something that I hope will come to play in the future in a less creepy way. But I do also hope that we learn how much more Bonnie knows about the God Valley incident that we didn't see during Eckert Island because we were too busy focusing on Kuma. Because after this flashback, we know that Bonnie knows so much more than we thought it is she knew, and I want to know it. Did Eris and Teach go to Lelucia or some random place? Because Kuma never asked them where they wanted to go. So my guess is that they were sent to the Sorbet Kingdom. That's where Kuma, Ginny, and Ivankov ended up. And that's because to the best of our knowledge, Kuma can only send people to places that he's been. And rather depressingly at this stage in his life, where else has he been as a child other than the Sorbet Kingdom and Marijois? So if the choices are Sorbet or the Holy Land, then we're going with Sorbet. But it could also be another option best described as somehow. You said Domi Reversi may work on people only when they are at their homes. Do we even know for sure what Luffy's birthplace is? We don't. What we know is that Luffy was raised on Dawn Island, but then again, so was Ace. And Ace wasn't born there, he popped out in South Blue, killed his mother doing so. So it does seem likely that Luffy was born somewhere else in the world and then given to Garp to raise by Dragon, who then took Luffy to Dawn Island. And if the Domi Reversi homeland theory does work out, then maybe we're in for a bit of a fun twist, right? Because imagine if Imu activates it, it affects Luffy, and we discover that he was actually born on Elbaf or Marijois or Laugh Tale or any number of equally as ridiculous locations.